agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Michael Baranowski, a professor of political science at Northern Kentucky University. I'm joined today by my conservative counterpart, Cleveland area attorney and defender of freedom, Jay Carson.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Jay. So it has been a long day. We are recording Friday afternoon. Jay has spent a long day defending justice or moneyed interest or something. Anyway, I'm sure he's been fighting the good fight.
Well, like Sal Paradise, I've been on the road.
There you go.
For the better part of the last couple days, but I'm here now.
I have not been sitting back on the couch eating bonbons. It's final grading season, and I actually turned in my grades. I'm ready for a break, and I should also mention to listeners that we are getting ready to take our Christmas, New Year's break. We do that every year. So our next regular show will be on either Wednesday the 28th or Thursday the 29th. And then we'll be back to our regular schedule on January 7th with Jay and me doing a show then. So a little bit of time off for the holidays. Congress is taking the time off. And I guess Donald Trump's a lot of NFTs, so he's taking some time off, anyway. So that's our schedule. If you're wondering, where's the show over the holidays?
Guess what I'm getting you for Christmas, Mike?
Oh, I can't wait. What a fantastic gift. Anyway, all right. So we have a lot to talk about today, though. The fiscal year 2023 budget's almost there. Some stuff about TikTok and FTX and crypto and campaign finance violations, and maybe even some stuff about the death penalty. Oregon's governor on the way out commuted a bunch of death sentences. So we'll see how much we can get to. And we'll get started right after this. All right, Jay. So, we're still, of course, in 2022, but fiscal year 2023 for the federal government actually started back on October 1st, which it's done every year since 1974. Prior to that, it started on July 1st. And I don't know if anyone's ever wondered why. Well, it's because businesses regularly have fiscal years that they align with their sort of natural cycles. Like, for instance, I'm in education, and so it's really common for the fiscal year to end on June 30th because, most students aren't in school over the summer. Things kind of slow down, that sort of thing. And the reason why the federal government changed from July 1st to October 1st was to give new members of Congress a little bit more time to sort of get acclimated so that they could more kind of fully participate in the budget process, which really starts at the beginning of the year. It takes a while to put the whole thing together. But, it's almost routine, I think, at this point for Congress to not meet any of those deadlines. October 1st has come and gone. Though that really is less common when one party controls both chambers and the presidency, as, the Democrats just barely do now. And when that does happen, though, Congress passes one or more continuing resolutions, which essentially freeze in place current levels of spending until a specified date, at which point they hope they'll be able to figure out something by that date. And if not, well, they can always just pass another CR. And back on September 30th, Congress passed a CR that was set to expire on December 16th. That's today. And this week, the House and Senate budgets negotiators came to an agreement on a basic framework for the this year's budget now. But they needed more time to iron out the details, so they approved another CR that moves the deadline back to December 23. That, of course, is Festivus for those of you who celebrate that holiday, as I do. Anyway. And, this has caused some tension, actually, on the Republican side between House and Senate Republican leaders. Kevin McCarthy on the House side is urging Republican senators to not support the agreement, at least publicly. And he told Sean Hannity last week, I think, or earlier this week, why would you ever move forward when there's a change in power in 21 days where Republicans would have a stronger hand? We wouldn't be talking about adding more money. We'd talk about decreasing. And to pass the budget, they'll need 10 Republican senators to actually agree to halt the inevitable filibuster, though, of course, final passage will only require all 50 Senate Democrats along with Vice President Harris. So, Jay, I'm wondering what you think about this kind of McConnell being willing to go go along basically and kind of get those 10 votes, as opposed to McCarthy making what I think a lot of folks on the right would seem to be a pretty reasonable argument.
Yeah, and you and I had this talk a little while ago about, do we expect a spending blowout kind of thing, lame duck spending blowout? And I said, of course we do. So I would be of the McCarthy persuasion on this. Let's hold the line. I think it's tough for Republicans to then take the, hey, now we've got especially Senate Republicans to stick their necks out after not having really gotten what they wanted, and sort of have this message be out there, right? I mean, to me, that's the biggest populist arguments that's typically made against mainstream Republicans, and I would put Mitch McConnell squarely in the mainstream Republicans, is that, and this is sort of the Trump argument, that they're just not tough enough, right? That they just roll over, they're just that sort of thing.
You mean as opposed to those Trump budgets that were so incredibly disciplined, where spending got, oh, wait a second, actually.
Well, yeah. No, fair enough. So, yeah, I think there's an argument there. I think we end up with a budget. I think McCarthy also has to do this in order just to firm up his right flank going into this speakership election, which I'm sure happens, right? I think that works out. But you've got to go through this dance first, that he's being tougher than McConnell. And maybe you get some concessions. And McConnell says, listen, if you need the Republicans to do this, here's where it needs to, here's what we need to get. And it's less of a spending blowout than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, but I mean, Republicans, at least modern Republicans, are fine with spending blowouts, Jay. I mean, you need to get with the program, I think.
I know. I'm one of the last old,
the dinosaurs here,
people in existence. Yeah.
But I think you're right. Clearly, McCarthy needs to shore up that right flank. But also, I think he just would rather not have to try to pass a budget at all. Just let the other side do it. I mean, it's just trying to manage his caucus is going to be incredibly difficult. Yeah. And really, there are only two things that Kevin McCarthy really has to do. And that is to pass a budget, at least he'll not do it this year, but maybe next year, and to figure out something about the debt ceiling. Those are the only two. The rest of the time, they could do whatever they want with Hunter Biden's laptop
CR and the whole thing until the cows come home. Yes,
but those are the two things that he has to do, and I don't think he wants to do them. And honestly, I don't blame him, given the caucus he has to work with.
Yeah.
So
no, I think we're in agreement on that.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything wrong at all in telling the party that's, again, at this point, still ostensibly governing, okay, you pass it.
Except that Mitch McConnell is saying, okay, and we'll help you.
Yeah.
And so, that's.
Yeah. Which again, a lot of people, are puzzled and would call preemptive surrender.
But it's almost like Mitch McConnell cares about the government functioning at some level, where I think there are plenty of Freedom Caucus folks who, don't see that as necessarily being a priority if you can own the libs. So there's that. But, if we look at the framework itself, and I think that's going to be fairly close to what the final deal is, we see defense spending around 10% higher than it was in fiscal year 22, this last year. And Democrats had been pushing for basically roughly an equal increase in non-defense spending. And that isn't quite going to happen, but it's going to be, it looks like somewhere around 8% or so. So, I mean, everyone gets a little bit of something, I suppose. And that's generally how these budget negotiations go.
Yeah. I think it does keep going in that direction. It's going to end up being more spending than what I would like, probably less spending than what you would like. Period. In terms of the military spending, I do think that's a good investment in that. We have been sending a lot of our stuff to Ukraine, and we need to make more of it, right? I mean, that's just part of a. And I think again, as a conservative, the area that I would tend to believe in, that is appropriate for government spending would be military and defense. Just on the basis of let's look at what is it that one, people can't do for themselves on their own. Two, what can't local governments do for people. Two, what can't states do? And then finally, to me, the fallback is the federal government on these things. So to me, and I think to most conservatives, even the ones in Congress today, view defense as an absolute core function. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's certainly a core function for all those defense contractors that very cleverly align themselves and, in almost every congressional district. And I should point out in that NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, that 800 and $58 billion, I think, give or take, that's around a 10% increase. That includes a 4.6% increase for military personnel. And that's the largest they've seen in 20 years. Of course, that doesn't come close to, keeping up with what inflation has been. And to me, it's always the troops that get the raw deal on this, whereas, the fancy equipment and that sort of thing, well, that's the sort of thing, because we got to take care of McDonnell Douglas and Boeing before we take care of, some Lance Corporal somewhere who's putting his life on the line.
I am all for supporting the troops, Mike. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I would love to see, in fact, a COLA, cost of living increase, that's actually built into military pay the same way it's built into retiree pay, though I don't see that happening anytime ever, really, basically, because, troops aren't as important as defense contractors if you're a member of Congress.
I'd introduce that bill.
I'd be a co-sponsor.
Right?
There you go.
But,
one other thing that's gotten a lot of discussion, at least in the last day or so, about this NDAA is the vaccine mandate removal. That was part of it, right? Because essentially a lot of folks on the right were saying, we will not support this unless you kind of hold your nose, Democrats, and go along with it. And that's what ended up happening. And there were some folks like, for instance, Senator Blackburn from Tennessee saying, service members should be focused on bolstering our national defense, not political mandates, that kind of stuff. And, it's curious to me, Jay, that, okay, so there's no longer a mandate for COVID, but let's see, there's a mandate for the flu, measles, mumps, rubella, polio, tetanus, and I'm thinking, well, gee, that sure seems political. So what do you think about the removing of the mandate?
Well, I would say the other stuff doesn't seem political, right? For a couple reasons. One, those are vaccines that we've had around for years, for forever and ever and ever. Everyone is, I shouldn't say everyone. I would say most everyone is comfortable getting those vaccines. There's no concern about, it hasn't been tested enough, hasn't, that sort of bit.
Let me answer that point before you go on to your next one. And I could see a year or two ago making that argument, but the FDA fully approved the Pfizer vaccine back in August of 2021, so it's been more than a year, and the Moderna vaccine in January of 2022, so it's been almost a year. So that's and especially, I would argue, if anyone's
in
going
comparison to say these other ones have been around, been used for 50 years.
But when do we? Well, except the flu vaccine is different every year. There's variants. So who gets to decide? I do, because I saw a video on YouTube. I mean, no, that's the FDA is the one who decides when.
I mean, you do because
and also
your body, your choice.
Well, there's a difference between me as private citizen and me as, say, a Marine or an airman or a seaman or something like that. That's a whole different thing. If anyone should be required, it should be those folks, because not getting vaccinated actually is a potential problem with military readiness. And so for all these Republican hypocrites who say, oh, my God, I love the military, I love defense, I call BS.
Okay. I guess you can call BS on that, but to me, it's and I've said this before, right? I'm double vaccinated, boosted the hell out of me. I'm brimming with anti-COVID vaccine. But at the same time, and I think it's safe and effective. Well, as far as I know, I haven't turned into a werewolf yet. I respect the sense of folks who, one, say it hasn't been tested enough. Now, again, you can say the FDA, process should be fine, and I'm on board with that. The other argument, there is a religious objection conscience argument in that the extent that the mRNA vaccines are made using fetal stem cells, there are people who have religious objection to that. And I think that's something that ought to be respected by the military or employers wherever, right? So I think that's a different, little bit of a different issue.
You don't think that? I mean, it's one thing to say you could wear a certain item of clothing, like of religious significance or something, but it's a little bit different when you refuse to do things that actually could affect military readiness. I mean, it's no one's going to say that an item of clothing or something like that is going to be an issue. Even a beard, you can argue maybe not so much, but not getting a vaccine for a contagious disease that, if not not generally deadly for healthy young people, but certainly can affect readiness. And I'm somebody, I'm not young anymore, but I'm relatively healthy. And when I got COVID, I know it knocked me down for a day or two, and it wasn't a big deal because I could just push back some assignments. But, if I'm actually in some position defending the country in some way, that's a little bit more of a big deal, actually.
Yeah. Well, how would you respond to, say, someone who has had COVID recently, and say, look, I just had it. I just got over it. I have a religious objection to the vaccine. I don't want to get it.
And I would say, well, you would say, then
don't join the military.
Exactly.
Okay, I guess that's one answer.
There are so many freedoms that people in the military give up, and this is just if you're a private citizen, I think that's a whole different case. But in the military, no, this to me is an easy call, and I think the Republicans who insisted on this, held the defense budget hostage because of this, are playing the worst sort of dangerous, destructive politics.
Well, I would say I think it is to some extent Republican virtue signal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. I would put it more in that category. Simply because I don't know how much of a real world effect this is going to have. I don't know that we have numbers on this sort of thing of how many military personnel. Well,
because there was a mandate up until now.
Unvaccinated or refused to vaccinate. But my sense is that's not going to be a significant number. Going
forward,
so
I don't know.
That's what I mean. Why I see it more as, look, you can criticize it, I think, as sort of empty virtue signaling. And I think that's a fair criticism.
Well, let's hope it's.
But I'm not sure how much it really would affect military readiness.
Oh, let's hope it's empty virtue signaling, I'll say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to something, very different, actually, I think. Maybe it's virtue signaling. I don't know, of a different sort. Anyway, but, several state governments now are banning the use of the Chinese-owned video app TikTok on their state government-issued devices and networks. In fact, this week, Alabama and Utah became the latest states to do so, and they join a bunch of other states. Let's see, both the Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Texas, Maryland, Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, and of course, this list would not be complete without Florida. The state of Indiana, they haven't banned the service, but this week they became the first state to sue TikTok. They're alleging that the service has deceived users about access that the Chinese government has to user data that's in violation of Indiana's state privacy laws, and that it's exposed kids to inappropriate content. And all of this follows repeated warnings from FBI Director Christopher Wray, who in late November, he told the House Homeland Security Committee that the Bureau had significant national security concerns about TikTok. He said that these concerns included the possibility that the Chinese government could use it to control data collection on millions of users or control the recommendation algorithm, which could be used for influence operations if they so chose, or to control software on millions of devices, which gives it an opportunity to potentially technically compromise personal devices. And ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikToks, for a while now, they've been saying that they store U.S. user data within the United States, and so they would not be compelled to turn over user data as Chinese law requires upon request.
Unless the Chinese ask for it.
There's that, yeah. And I should point out this week, Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio introduced legislation that would ban TikTok from operating in the United States, and companion legislation was introduced in the House by Wisconsin Republican Mike Gallagher and Illinois Democrat Raja Krishnamurthy. And it has a great name. I love the act. It is. You have it there. You have it there in front of you.
I do. It's the Antisocial CCP Act.
Yes.
Which
averting the national threat of internet surveillance, oppressive censorship, and influence, and algorithmic learning by the Chinese Communist Party Act. Is this, Jay, a new low in ridiculous bill naming?
I think it is.
I think
it is.
We have a winner. I think. Yeah.
So as much as I sort of, well, a couple thoughts on one on the state bans and even on a federal government ban on federal government devices. I think that's smart and warranted. I see no issue with that. Rubio doing a broader ban it in the United States. I'm less crazy about that. Just because, again, it's almost the same argument we just went through with the military. You can say, listen, if you are working for the government, it's a government device and you could have government information. Obviously, that could compromise you and could compromise the national security or just the functioning, right? Just that, allows the potential monkey wrenches in whatever, the Department of Agriculture or whatever. I think that's less so if individuals want to use an app that lets the data be shared with the Chinese government allegedly. I suppose they can, right? I'm just generally hesitant to the idea of Congress getting into banning this app or that app.
I'm actually okay with it because I think there are a lot of parallels because we're talking about a potentially communicable thing, right? That's highly a virus, or it could be inserted in a very real sense that could threaten national security. And I think anyone who believes that if the Chinese government puts pressure on ByteDance, that they would not release whatever the Chinese government wanted in a second.
Yeah, no, I think they absolutely would.
Yeah.
No, but I guess my objection is to, as I understand it, a broad federal prohibition on one particular app. I don't like you always accuse me of being concerned about slippery slopes, and that would be one of them.
Well,
even if it is sticking it to the Chinese communists, which I usually like.
There you go. I am okay with it in this instance because I think it could be averted if, for instance, ByteDance sold off the company. Now, obviously, they don't want to do that. It's very popular, something like 80 million monthly active users in the U.S., but some sort of arrangement where there's absolutely no connection between the technical side and maybe any profits. And there are ways that could be arranged, certainly. And I kind of hope that's the eventual outcome of this. But I think it's a big problem. Back in 2020, people might recall, President Trump actually tried to do something very much like this. He signed an executive order invoking his National Emergencies Act authority to ban any transactions with ByteDance. So that would have banned TikTok, basically. That was overturned in federal courts as being outside of his authority. Donald Trump surely was used to that by that point.
I think that's the correct decision.
And I think we talked about that at the time, but I think it's well within Congress's authority, certainly, to do this. And I think it's a reasonable concern given all the issues that the FBI has raised about it. And this is legislation that I would be certainly inclined to support.
Huh?
But you not so much.
So
I stand with Marco Rubio.
You, Marco Rubio, and the Antisocial CCP Act.
What a world!
No, I'm not. Again, I'm very sympathetic to the cause and what he's trying to accomplish. What I'm just less thrilled about is the government saying, stepping in and saying what products you can or can't buy.
Well, I think that, I see what you're saying, but I think the slippery slope stops with you end the slope at saying, well, anything that the Chinese government can use to conduct cyber warfare on the United States. I'm okay with
that. That would be a good place to stop the slippery slope.
So I am okay for that. And I think it's part and parcel of the much tougher line that the Biden administration has taken against the Chinese government in the technological area. And so I just see this as part of a larger package of things. And I certainly hope that I don't actually think it's going to go anywhere in Congress, but I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So
I think let's put it this way. Even if I may or may not love the bill itself, I would very much welcome the debate and the discussion on it.
Yeah.
And just shining a light on this issue, because I think that's almost as important as a prohibition.
And maybe this is just a way to get ByteDance to truly sever any sort of technological relationship with TikTok, and that would be the best outcome, as opposed to some sort of very broad legislative sort of thing.
Right.
So,
right. But again, it's still to me, I think there's still just if you have it installed on your machine and it's such that Chairman Xi can switch a button, and which he apparently did with my other computer. I mean I think that's these are legitimate concerns, and I agree with you. It's certainly within Congress's power to act. So.
Well, let's just take a quick break, and then we will come right back and talk about some other weird technological stuff. Not weird. I guess I'm an old person, and so crypto is weird to me. But anyway, I'm so glad I didn't invest and I didn't listen to Matt Damon and Larry David. But anyway, we'll get to that in just 1 second. Okay, Jay. So this week, Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder and former CEO of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX, was charged in an 8-count federal indictment for wire fraud, money laundering, and campaign finance violations. Now, the 30-year-old Bankman-Fried was taken into custody. I refuse to call him SBF. It makes me want to sort of throw up a little, so I won't do that. Anyway, he was taken into custody this week by Bahamian authorities. He's kind of a golden boy of the kind of new emerging crypto industry, as well as a major donor to the Democratic Party. And it's pretty impressive how quickly his fortunes literally have risen and fallen, particularly the fall.
What the hell were we doing when we were 30?
Not that for sure. Anyway,
although I'll admit, I had not heard of him before this, the FTX.
You were not in the know. That's the problem,
That shows,
And they filed for bankruptcy last month, and now the firm's under investigation by, a whole bunch of agencies. There's the SEC, the CFTC, the DOJ. There's probably a few I don't even know about, but they're being thoroughly investigated. And both the House and the Senate have started hearings focused on FTX's collapse, though at this point, we haven't seen any specific legislative proposals. I wouldn't be surprised if something comes out of that. And I don't even know if it's clear that what we know about the fall of FTX necessarily says all that much about the broader crypto industry in general, aside from maybe a general rule that if you invest in new industries, you're taking some pretty significant risks. And so, when Matt Damon's giving you financial advice, that's literally fortune favors the brave. Maybe you need to kind of step back and think twice about doing that. But anyway, what's your take on all this, Jay? So,
no, I'm, as you might expect, an old school investor in things. So I was not involved heavily in crypto or FTX or anything like that. But you make sort of a good point that to the extent I understand what all he's being charged with and what has been alleged, it's not really any kind of weird techno crypto thing. It's just old fashioned regular embezzlement fraud. It's crypto is just kind of the MacGuffin, if you will, right? It's not, it's plain old stealing somebody else's money. The fact that it was crypto versus some other, regular U.S. greenbacks. There's nothing, special or technical about this. I think it's more sort of like what you pointed out, that when you have these types of burgeoning industries. Now, maybe not industry isn't the right word, but investment fields, right? And if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. I mean, there's all sorts of these sort of bubbles, right? Where, whether it's Dutch tulips or something like that. It was the big thing, and everybody poured into it, and everybody was doing it, and so.
And there are always a few people who make a minority of people who make a ton of money.
First couple,
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's sort of that to me is the larger lesson. And then the regulators, the market steps in various ways, and they make it less lucrative, but a lot safer. There was a Twitter exchange between like a crypto guy and someone who I guess was less of a crypto guy, saying something like, well, I was worried about my investment in XYZ crypto exchange. It was 12:15 a.m. and I was able to get up and transfer some funds, and 2 minutes later everything was all done and I wasn't worried. And try that with the traditional finance industry. And the response was one guy's, well, I don't really worry about my bank, so it's not even an issue. And I think that to me, so I guess really what's more of an issue, at least some people are making more of an issue, I think rightfully so, are the political donations side of it. 'Cause campaign finance violation, that's a big, certainly to me, a big part of this story. And Sam Bankman-Fried was the, he was the sixth largest donor in this 2021-2022 campaign cycle. And that's a lot of money, $36.8 million, all but $240,000 of it went to Democrats. Now, though this is the arrogance of...
he made Republican contributions, but I think it's a funny story.
But then when he said, and this is just weird, when he said to a reporter for, I think, a tech journal, saying that he made just as much in dark money donations to Republicans, but then he said, Republicans freak the F out if you donate to a Republican, reporters do. They're all secretly liberal, and I didn't want to have that fight. So then he tells the tech journalist, what did he think she was going to do with that? But anyway, that was kind of bizarre, I think. The point being, I think more generally, that crypto has donated a ton of money, both to Democrats and Republicans. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that most big money donors donate in that strategic way. You can spread a lot of money around, and that's how they typically do it. And that's what was done here. So at least that's my take on the political donation side. I mean, it's not surprising to me that there are these allegations of all these violations, straw donors and things like that, because it's a system that's designed.
And when you're moving that much money, it's difficult to do it legally.
Well,
right?
It's difficult to do it directly to campaigns legally, but it's easy to spend a ton of dark money, a ton of supposedly unconnected money illegally. But everyone knows that this game is rigged. I mean, when you have, for instance, it's a common practice in Congress where a top staffer for somebody will quit the office just a little bit before an election, all of a sudden just miraculously become the head of a super PAC that supports that candidate. Right. How did that happen? Right. I'm sure there's no coordination. Right. I mean, but of course, Congress designed this system because they don't want to shut the spigot off, and it is a deeply corrupting system.
I can't disagree with you entirely on that.
But the weird thing to me, Jay, is that, I mean, there was this huge call by a lot of people on the right saying, oh my God, look at all the money that this guy donated to Democrats, and clearly this was protecting him for a while. And yet these are the same folks who don't want to reform campaign finance anyway. And so it's a puzzler. Not really. Yeah,
I suppose so. My sense, and look, on campaign finance, I think we've talked about this. I'm very much if you want to donate to a campaign, you can donate as much as you want, but full disclosure. That would be my preference.
Well, we have that though. I mean, that's the thing, is you can spend.
No, there's still there's still limits to what you.
Well, let me
can
give you an
donate
example.
to an actual.
Let me give you an example.
Campaign.
George Soros, the top donor in the 2021-22 cycle. He's a total Democrat donor. He doesn't give anything to Republicans. His total contributions in this cycle, $128.4 million. Of that, only $1.7 million was hard money that went right to campaigns. So, like,
right, exactly. That's my point.
And that's what I'm saying. That outside money, where's that going? Who's spending? I mean, that doesn't even count the dark money that we don't have donors associated. It is just,
and that's why I think, again, there's no perfect answer, but I think the better answer is the reason that it's that 1% going direct to campaigns is that you're limited in how you can donate to campaigns. So, and they max out on their campaign donation through the actual campaign committee, and then you go spend it somewhere else with a super PAC or an independent expenditure or wherever you do. I'm just saying. Make an honest, let's be honest about it.
But the problem is it's a system that can't change because the Supreme Court has clearly indicated, number one, that corporations are persons for the purposes of political speech and a lot of other purposes. That's a whole other conversation. And that donating money or spending money on ads or what advocacy is a form of speech. And so therefore, big swaths of, for instance, McCain-Feingold, the bipartisan legislation signed into law by a Republican president in 2002, was unconstitutional. And as long as that,
and I said that we weren't doing the show then, Mike, but I said that at the time.
As long as that is in place, it is going to be nearly impossible to reform the system. The best proposal that I've seen is some variant of a real public option. A lot of people don't realize that the major party candidates for president do have the option of public financing. They can get, I believe it's a little over $100 million or something like that.
Ralph Nader was the last one to do that, right?
Barack Obama was the first one to refuse it back in 2008. John McCain took it. Obama didn't. And since then, everyone hasn't taken it because, of course, now you need like $1 billion or so to run for president, basically.
Yeah. And it limits your options to do,
Exactly. Yeah. And so the best systems I've seen, the best idea I've seen is based on, it comes from Larry Lessig, who's a Harvard professor, which basically it works on, it's a voucher system, essentially, where, and there are variants of it, but essentially every registered voter gets, say, a $50 or $100 voucher. They can distribute it to whatever campaigns that they want, and candidates don't have to take the money. But if they do take the money, then they can't raise or accept any other funding. And that but that means it's no longer a constitutional issue because you're not.
Yeah, because they're making the choice not to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so to me, that's the only thing that really would work or potentially work without amending the Constitution. But I don't see that as being very likely.
So Ohio had that sort of system for a while, not as incompletely, right? But they had there was a $100 tax credit, refundable tax credit if you donated to state campaigns, and they did away with it, I think, in the last year or so. And I think, which I think was too bad, but.
I think that's maybe a step in the right direction. But the problem,
buy influence for free just for a couple $100.
But the problem is it's such it's multiple steps. You have to know about it. It's not a direct sort of thing. Whereas with just like a straightforward voucher program, then that creates a real incentive for candidates to actually reach out to regular people because they realize all of a sudden they can do the math and be like, wow, there's a lot of money just sitting around there doing nothing, and that becomes a very.
I'm less crazy about the mechanics of that too, though.
About politicians reaching out to the public as opposed to George Soros?
Yes, and the voucher piece of how do you how is that voucher spent? Where does it go? That sort of thing.
You mean like
here's my example. Okay. If I were a horribly corrupt person. And seeking to corrupt that system. there may well be people who receive vouchers, and let's say the voucher is worth $100 for whatever candidate, and you just that person has to do is assign it to whatever campaign. I come along and I say, I would really appreciate if you would support this candidate. Here's $50. Why don't you assign your voucher to this candidate, this committee?
You mean like pay $50 for a $100 voucher?
Yes.
Sure. There's no, and that's the problem with straw buyers or anything else. It's impossible to. But the only other, if you take people out of it, then you have a public financing system, and I know that would make your head explode.
No. But like what I'm saying is the.
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
like the Ohio system before, the way it was is you would write the check first,
right, and
then you would check on your tax form. I made a donation to X campaign, and it could be cross-checked against the campaign, against the bank, and all that. So there's some paper trail there. It's not just.
Well, even with straw donations, there's still a problem where you could be the same thing. So
you could. Yeah, obviously you could. Somebody could pay me $100 and I could write the check for $100. But it's still that. What I'm saying is, I think that the write the check first system is better than here's the money, where do you send it system.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think of course
it's. Neither's perfect, but I think my version is. Less apt to corruption. The other one, it took me all 15 seconds to say, geez.
Well, I think the problem with your system is it's less apt to actually have anyone actually use it. Regular people, certainly, because regular people, most regular Americans are going to say, I'm going to write this check for $100, and then I know that at the end of the tax year, the government will reimburse me for that. There are people that's just not the kind of system that's going to get the sort of widespread buy-in from regular Americans that actually might give them more of a real voice in the process, as opposed to the George Soroses of the world.
Is it better? And part of the rationale behind that Ohio tax credit had always been, and I thought it was a good one, was to get people invested not just in the system, but invested in making political donations. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I do too.
This is going to sound again sort of. There's this sense of money in politics is somehow evil or corrupting.
No, it's the concentration of money that's corrupting.
And I think the more if you can get people to say, listen, you ought to invest in candidates who you believe in.
Absolutely. The problem, of course, is
that's a good thing. Let's get more people investing. It's almost everybody all about we need to have more people voting. I would be all for we need to have more people contributing to the campaigns.
Yeah,
because you are at that point putting your money on the line a little bit. You've got some skin in the game.
The problem, of course, is that of the inherent inequality, right? I could give, say, $50 to a campaign, and I'm not going to feel it. But I know plenty of people who could. $50 would be a big deal, even if they knew they were going to get it back in, 6 months or a year. And so how do you equalize that and not make this a system of, yes, a free marketplace, free speech, but where I have a bigger microphone, I have louder speech than, someone who's not as economically fortunate, and Elon Musk has a friggin' enormous microphone. That's a tough problem.
It is, but it's also, I guess I look, the New York Times has a bigger microphone than I do. If we're comparing microphones, but that's to me sometimes that there are inequalities in the world, and I'm not sure they all can be equalized.
No, of course they can't. But
when you try to, I think sometimes that breeds a whole lot more problems.
I think you would agree, just saying, "Oh well, that's how the world is." Women have always been in the house. We've always had slaves. You can take that however you want, essentially, and that it becomes very much an excuse for doing nothing. So I'm not.
Well, no. I'm. What you're saying is those are sort of specific policies versus I'm saying, look. Some people have always had more money.
Sure.
Than others.
Yeah. And you can't. Yeah.
And it turns out it's it's better to be rich than
there you go. Yeah.
than to be poor. Most that again. That's
other things being equal. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So my other solution, this is my perennial solution that, again, I don't know that it ever, much will come of it, but, and I say this a lot of times, and people have heard me say it before. If you want to get money out of politics, get politics out of money. If we had
now, who's being a utopian? Oh my God, Jay!
I know. Well, no, I'm saying if the
ghost of Calvin Coolidge is smiling here at this point at you, but
I would hope so. I would hope so. The increase in spending on political campaigns has mirrored and kind of marched lockstep with the growth of the regulatory state. Back in the 1940s, 1950s, which was still a pretty hefty regulatory state, you didn't have this type of you didn't have things turning on who wins the presidency. It was less of a big deal, and you would say, well, all right, look, one side might be nominally more pro-labor and the other more pro-business. But there wasn't this sort of sense, I think, of businesses saying, look, we got to be in the game. We got to be putting a lot of money in because we are so highly regulated. And what I'm saying is the more regulation there is, the more you need to spend.
Well, yes and no. Regulation's part of it, but also just providing basic services. I mean, we just passed a $858 billion defense budget, and I'm not imagining you're thinking that we need to cut down on that significantly, right? And I mean, we need significant regulation in things like safety and healthcare and all kinds of other areas. Sure. And you don't have to do too much adding before you have enough money in the pot where it's going to be worth almost anyone's time to try to corrupt the process for their own financial gains. That's just the nature of living in an advanced industrial economy.
Well, I don't even know it's corrupt the process for the. So, I mean, going back to the Bankman,
that guy.
What it seems, because I won't say SBF yet. What it seems to me that he's doing, and this is what most people do, right? Is most people industry actors?
Yeah, sure.
And this is something I learned early on. Is look, it's usually easier to pay protection money than to fund a revolution, and so that's that's why you make the donations to both parties. Is what they're not trying to, and in some cases there are obviously rent seekers who are trying to buy particular favors, but usually, again in my experience, when industries donate, it's just on the sense of, well, look, leave us the hell alone.
I don't know if you looked at tax code lately, Jay, but I find that to be a very difficult argument to swallow, given the probably what's now thousands of pages of carve-outs for various industries. I don't know. It's
I'm not disputing you that there are the rent seeking and so forth that goes on. But I would submit that more of the money is or there's more money spent not on trying to get those specific carve-outs and more money in just preventing something unfavorable coming down the pike.
I get that, and it kind of comes from your basic distrust of government and belief that the market is better than government. And I'm saying this is based on my experience with actual political actors and industries. Sure. As a Republican, working with Republicans.
Well, yeah.
I mean, no, and that's a big difference because, I mean, that's the bubble you're in.
I'm saying whether or not I'm a Republican or not, this is how they spend their money.
But I'm saying it matters. Well, it matters in a real way because what they're going to be, of course, they're going to tell you, well, yes, we just want to be left alone and we're just worried about government, imposing its heavy hand. They're not going to say, well, what we're really trying to do is we're not really for competition. What we'd really like is just free money from the government. Of course, they're not going to say that to you, but that's their game.
Oh, some people do say that. But
some do, yes, some do.
That's my. I guess that's my sense, and having worked on some of these issues is what businesses want most, and maybe you'll think this is Pollyannish, or maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but it's not just political experience. It's the rest of my life as well. Businesses can live with predictability. Businesses can live with anything as long as it's predictable, right? Because they can always just
most anything. Yep.
Pass the cost on to somebody else. What troubles them is the stuff that is unpredictable, that they don't see coming out of left field usually, and that's the reason, right? That I take this view that what most companies want is just that no surprises piece.
And I'm not. It depends on the industry.
To give us a special something or something. Yeah, and some industries are more apt and more able to get the special something.
I would say in mature industries that have established a foothold and kind of got the sort of playing field more or less where they want it, they're just like, hey, just keep the rules the same and don't do anything for our competitors you wouldn't do for us. And, so, I think I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we're just kind of disagreeing in terms of emphasis, really. I see it much more as...
And what I'm saying is my view is less villainous than what yours is.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't call it villainous. I would just say they're just human beings, just naturally seeking advantage, taking advantage of a system that allows them to do that. In fact, I would be concerned if I were a shareholder and I found out, my the company doesn't have a lobbyist in D.C., isn't pushing for special anything, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. It's like, hey, buddy, get your butt down there and let's get to work, because your only duty as a company is to maximize shareholder value.
Amen.
Yeah. So that whole corporate social responsibility thing just makes me roll my eyes in so many ways.
Oh, good.
Anyway. All right. Well, while I'm rolling my eyes, why don't we end today? We'll get to in the midweek show. We'll talk about death sentences and the death penalty and the Twitter files. I've been wanting to talk about that for a while. I was kind of hoping that's such a tailor-made for Trey thing, but we'll have to get to some of that, I think, given the crazy stuff Elon Musk is doing, that and some other stuff as well. But before we go today, given the fact that we won't be doing a show until after Christmas, I thought it would be fun to end on sort of a different kind of recommendations. Our Christmas music recommendations. Jay, you are a very musical person. You have varied and high-class musical taste. And so in part, I'm doing this just to kind of hear what you might recommend, because I'm looking forward to it.
So a lot of Christmas music I bugs me. And we could do a whole show just on my thoughts on Christmas music and appropriate, not appropriate. And because I have a strong feelings about, I grew up in church, sort of an old school, traditional, mainstream Protestant. I was exposed to a lot of that old hymn type music, and also works of people like Handel, Mendelssohn, that thing. So I if I'm listening to my favorite sort of Christmas carols, right, that are religious in nature, Joy to the World, again, Handel. I think anything from the Messiah, which obviously wasn't written specifically as a Christmas piece, but you get the Hallelujah chorus, and it's played a lot at Christmas. I like again, this is just weird picking favorites. Oh Holy Night, just for the musicality of it. And there's the one part, and this is just a weird thing that I dig. It's where the you hit the one high note and they hold that, and then the harmony, the chords move up underneath it. I think that's cool. It's not unique to that. That's all.
Musically interesting. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Can kind of give you chills at times.
There's what I'm saying. There's a little more going on. In Oh Holy Night than a lot of other Christmas. The other things that I kind of like, and this is going to sound weird, there are certain Christmas songs that have a kind of melancholy. That really works with me, because I'm not a Christmas season kind of person. I'm not I tend not to be joyful. I'm more wistful. But like, have yourself a merry little Christmas.
Okay. So you're not talking like Santa Claus goes straight to the ghetto or anything like that. No.
But
Right.
That's a
Great James
that's
Brown
kind of
song.
in a weird way. It's a major key and all this stuff, but it's a very sad kind of dark song. Right?
I hadn't thought about it that
at
way.
least I've always found it that way. The other one would be White Christmas, which again, if I'm talking musically, and I'm not the first person to say this, someone else pointed this out to me. But again, it's sort of, there's a sadness about it.
Are you
right?
thinking like Bing Crosby or what's your kind of
yeah? But no, it's one of those. It sounds like it's sort of a happy, hopeful song, but it's again, there's a darkness to it, and there's this one chord towards the end, and I'm not going to sing the whole piece, but it's where there's what's called the cadence goes from it's a 4 and then it goes to a minor and it's 4, and it's just for a second, but it's it's this weird touch of darkness kind of in it.
Okay, I'll have to listen for that.
So that's again, I'm a gosh, I have the piano behind me, Mike. I could go and if we do that maybe for the midweek show.
There you go. I like it.
We're going to do the midweek show later, but I will have the piano performance. The chord I'm talking about.
Cool. Yeah.
But so those I guess are my Christmas favorites.
I like it. I like it. I kind of figured we'd start with you because I knew that you would bring the class and I would bring the crass, as it were. And yes, that's exactly what's going to happen, because I should start by saying I used to have this tradition back when there were still CDs that people bought every year.
Actually, can I just inject one?
Please do.
But I did get to the point of the song. It's in the line in White Christmas. May your days be merry and bright. Okay, there's days merry and bright. And he holds that chord, yep. And then below it drops into that the minor.
I can hear it now.
Yeah.
That's the spot to listen for, folks. No, not at all. So I just say I approach Christmas in a very different way. Every year I used to buy like an album, whatever, a CD worth of Christmas stuff back when, like I said, there were record stores selling stuff. And one I got, a million years ago now at this point, but it's my all-time favorite Christmas album. Jay, you probably don't have a copy of it. It's Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics. You probably don't, I'm guessing.
Oh, I am familiar with Mr. Hankey. And I also, I'd be remiss if I didn't also reference the South Park, Oh Holy Night.
That's a good one. Yeah. I mean, it's got Mr. Hankey, the Christmas Pooh, Merry Effing Christmas by Mr. Garrison, and Christmas Time in Hell, which Satan sings very well, I think, actually. So it's my favorite all-time album. But when I was thinking about my favorite songs, I came up with a top 5. I try to bring in some things people might not have heard, but also that kind of remind me usually of my wife and the time we spend together at Christmas. There's a song called Tiny Tree Christmas by Ryan Miller that I really like. Kind of a fun, happy little song. You might have heard of Fairy Tale in New York by the Pogues. It was huge.
I do like that.
Huge in the UK, apparently, and Ireland, but not that big in the US. And talk about melancholy kind of down.
If I'm talking pop Christmas songs, I would definitely, that'd be in my top 5. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I will admit that, yes, one of my favorite Christmas songs of all time is All I Want for Christmas Is You. I don't care. I know, but I love that song. It's just, I love that song.
Can I throw in one more?
You sure can.
How many more do you have? So I would also say on my list of Christmas melancholy would be the theme from Charlie Brown Christmas.
Okay,
Christmas Time Is Here.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good one.
That sort of just sums up my mood, right?
I get that.
There's very much this darkness, sadness about it.
Jay's got some serious darkness going on there. We're picking up on that, But so. Then I go right to my next one, which is anything but dark, right? Eric Cartman singing Swiss Colony Beef Log, which I sing along, I dance with the dogs. I'm very happy. It's just a wonderful song. But actually my favorite Christmas song is one that you mentioned, White Christmas, Otis Redding's version, which to me is just just stops me in my tracks whenever I hear it. I think it's just one of the most beautiful songs and one of the most beautiful versions ever, as far as I'm concerned. Bing Crosby, Step Aside, Otis owns that song, and I am hugely biased toward Otis Redding, but that to me, best Christmas song ever. Even better than Swiss Call Me Beeflock, but just by a little bit,
All right.
actually. So there we go. Anyway, I hope listeners, you didn't mind the indulgence there. We'll have links to everything in case you're curious about some of those. I mean, how could you not be if you haven't heard Swiss Call Me Beeflock? And, anyway, modern Christmas classic. But also, just a reminder that thanks to all of the folks who have donated to the show this month. Through Patreon, we had Robert, Tristan, and Eric, who's been a supporter for a while, recently increased his support. And as I've mentioned the last couple of weeks, all new donations we get in December, they're going to help out Trey getting through a pretty tough time. So thank you very much. We really appreciate that. And as always, if you want to become a supporter, you can just go to patreon.com/politicsguys. On Venmo, we're @politicsguys. You can support us through PayPal. You can find all the support links in the show notes every week, as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you would like to get the midweek show, but you're just not in the place where you can financially support us, totally not a problem. Send me an email, mike@politicsguys.com, and I will get you set up with that supporters midweek show every week. And and also I should mention where we're going to be doing on the midweek show, I think some listener questions, responses to that. If you ever want to get in touch with us for that, you can do it through old-fashioned 20th century email, mail@politicsguys.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. We have the Discord group, which is always a lot of fun for our Patreon supporters. And yes, I'm talking about you, the Poopsicle, and Florida Rep, and the rest of the gang. A lot of fun there, certainly. And finally, a special thanks, as always, to our fantastic executive producers, Bruce Johnson, Wilma Moreno, Andra Masker, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, and Don Oglesby. We'll be back with a new episode for you. Well, I think the 27th or the 28th. We hope you'll join us.